March 6, 2026. Maggie Gyllenhaal's The Bride hits theaters. Jessie Buckley and Christian Bale star in a Frankenstein reimagining set in 1930s Chicago. Critics are deeply divided. Audiences react differently than critics. The box office, a disaster, 80 million budget, 13 million worldwide. Here's everything about The Bride reviews and why fans can't agree. The setup, big swings and bold choices. The Bride isn't your typical Frankenstein adaptation. Director Maggie Gyllenhaal, who earned Oscar nominations for her directorial debut The Lost Daughter, decided to reimagine Mary Shelley's classic through a crime-romance lens. Think Bonnie and Clyde meets Bride of Frankenstein in Prohibition-era Chicago. Christian Bale plays Frankenstein's monster, now called Frankie. He's lonely, he's volatile, and he travels to 1930s Chicago asking groundbreaking scientist Dr. Cornelia Euphronius, played by five-time Oscar nominee Annette Bening, to create a companion for him. Together, they revive a murdered young woman. The Bride, played by Jessie Buckley, is born. What follows is described by Metacritic as beyond what either of them imagined. Murder, possession, a wild and radical cultural movement, and outlaw lovers in a combustible romance. The film runs 2 hours and 6 minutes. It's rated R for violence, sexual content, and language. And according to Rotten Tomatoes, it's concocted with all the restraint of a mad scientist's experiment, lurching in so many different creative directions that the overall effect is both sloppy and inspired. That quote perfectly captures how divisive this movie became. The critical reception, 59% rotten. The Bride debuted on Rotten Tomatoes with a critics' tomatometer score of 59% rotten based on over 100 reviews. That's not good, but it's also not terrible. It's the dreaded middle, divisive enough that critics can't agree whether it's brilliant or a mess. Some critics praised Gyllenhaal's bold vision. FlickDirect's Allison Rose called it a film with many subtleties and underlying messages simmering just below the surface that make the audience think about what they just witnessed. Nerdist praised it as glorious, reminding viewers what going to the movies is all about. They called it a lush gothic romance that has one foot in reality and one in the world of the arcane. That hashtag show declared it an electrifying and bold reanimation, stating this is not a nostalgic retread of Frankenstein, it's a reclamation project, but the negative reviews hit hard. Page 6 brutally headlined their review. Jessie Buckley's latest is one of the worst movies I've seen in this job. The playlist tweeted, Jessie Buckley and Christian Bale cannot salvage Maggie Gyllenhaal's monstrously misguided movie. Discussing Film called it a disappointing mess that goes nowhere, despite Jessie Buckley and Christian Bale trying their best. The Independent's Clarice Logry said Gyllenhaal has regrettably pulled a Frankenstein herself. All those ideas, yet they haven't quite stitched up together to make a beautiful corpse. The Boston Globe's Odie Henderson commented that individual parts of The Bride work, but as a whole, the critic in me found it confusing and irritating. The film verdict described it as Maggie Gyllenhaal's exasperating maximalist take on Bride of Frankenstein that never suffers from a lack of ideas or nerve but ultimately collapses under its own weight. Empire magazine summed up the division perfectly. Fans of Maggie Gyllenhaal will be disappointed. Fans of Mary Shelley will be disappointed. Fans of unhinged cinema will be morbidly intrigued. What critics actually criticized. The recurring complaints centered on three main issues. First, the tone. Critics describe the film as chaotic, unfocused, and disjointed. It shifts wildly between gothic horror, crime thriller, romantic comedy, feminist manifesto, and social commentary without finding a cohesive voice. The Movie Blog wrote that the crowded narrative, inconsistent tone, and underdeveloped characters prevent The Bride from fully succeeding. The audience reaction, 74% fresh. Here's where things get interesting. While critics gave The Bride a rotten 59%, audiences on Rotten Tomatoes gave it a fresh 74% based on over 500 verified ratings. That's a 15-point gap. Audiences liked it significantly more than critics did. The audience popcorn meter consensus reads, The bride unapologetically walks down the bloody aisle with style and verve, sparking mixed reactions. Some question its unity, while many more wholeheartedly say "I do" without a prenup. So what explains the difference? Audiences who went to see The Bride knew what they were getting into. This wasn't marketed as a traditional Frankenstein adaptation. It was sold as a wild, audacious punk horror romance that doesn't care if you like it. Critics, on the other hand, are judging the film against standards of narrative coherence, tonal consistency, and thematic clarity. By those metrics, The Bride falls short. But for audiences looking for something bold and different, the messiness is part of the appeal. The CinemaScore, C+. CinemaScore, which polls moviegoers on opening night, gave The Bride a C+. That's rough. A C+ CinemaScore typically indicates audiences left theaters disappointed or confused. For context, horror films often score lower on CinemaScore because they're divisive. But C+ suggests general audiences who weren't specifically seeking out this kind of film didn't enjoy it. The disconnect is clear. Hardcore fans who wanted bold, experimental horror loved it. The box office disaster. Despite mixed to positive audience scores, The Bride bombed spectacularly at the box office. Opening weekend, 7.3 million domestic, 13.6 million worldwide, against an $80 million production budget. That's a catastrophic failure. IndieWire declared it one of the bigger flops of 2026. The Bride fell to number 2 at the domestic box office, ending Warner Brothers' The Test Screening Controversy. In an interview with the New York Times, Maggie Gyllenhaal revealed that changes were made after test screening audiences reacted negatively to some of the movie's more violent scenes. There's sexual violence. There's violence. Because it's a big studio movie, we tested it. We had big screenings in malls where people came to see it, which I had never been a part of as an actress or a director before. So fascinating, she recalled. And one of the things that they brought up was the violence. Is it too violent? And I was talking about it with a girlfriend of mine who said, and she wasn't being reductive, I wonder if you had been a man making this movie, if you would have had the same response. That quote sparked debate online. Was the violence criticism rooted in unconscious bias against female directors? Or was the film genuinely too violent for mainstream audiences? Test screening reports from March 2025, a full year before release, described the film as negative and messy, difficult to categorize. Those concerns proved accurate. March 6, 2026. The Bride divides everyone. Critics, 59% rotten. Audiences, 74% fresh. CinemaScore, C+. Box office, 7.3 million domestic against 80 million budget. Warner Brothers, streak broken. Jesse Buckley and Christian Bale praised. Gyllenhaal's bold vision admired but criticized as chaotic, unfocused mess. Fans of unhinged cinema morbidly intrigued. Everyone else disappointed.